So we're going to first talking about this tendency to look inwards by hearing from our minister, Bruno Le Maire, who's going to give a brief overview, and I hope that technically everything works. Mr. Le Maire, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you for this invitation. I'm sorry that I couldn't be with you today as I have been in the past. I obviously would like to acknowledge and say hello to my friend Jean-Pierre Raffarin. I know that he puts a lot of energy into organizing this forum, and I would like to remind him that I really find his subjects very, very important. So right now we're going through the COVID crisis, which has led to a new world that's going to redefine a lot of an economic and political balance. And the major geopolitical question now is seeing China and the United States and how they work with each other and who comes out ahead as the #1 world power. And that is why it is important for us, France, Europe, to know how we can position ourselves in between this rivalry between the two. So we have to defend our values. We need our technological independence, which is the absolute condition for a political and strategic independence. So we need to we can't depend on Chinese airplanes or AI that is produced in China. So I want to share 3 main ideas that I had about this. Number 1 is that innovation and research are the keys to political independence in the 21st century. There's no political sovereignty without technological sovereignty. We need to master quantum computing, AI, hydrogen production. It's not a coincidence if China has put a huge tax credit on research on top of the French tax, which is a very high tax. We need to have radically new technological solutions if we want to both protect the environment and if we don't want the environmental protection to lead to negative growth. So that means we have to bet massively on hydrogen. I think that nuclear energy, we need to continue to invest in it because it's a key mix in the French energy sector. Innovation has to be part of the fight against climate change. Obviously, innovation has a drawback, which is considerable for someone like me as Minister of Finance, and that is it costs a lot. And we can't take on this cost ourselves. We have to pool our resources. No European state can invest 30 billion euros in development of hydrogen alone. No one can invest alone 30, 40 or billion euros in semiconductors, because this is key to industrial sovereignty in the 21st century. So we need to pool our resources and be able to invest in semiconductors, hydrogen production, electric batteries, AI, and independent cloud. My second conviction is that innovation has to have a key place in this. We're in a moment in the 21st century, as we know, where China and the United States are 2 big empires. Europe needs to be the 3rd amongst this empire of nations and needs to ask the question, things that have come up over the course of the last few months and years. Has Europe risen to the challenge? Have we risen to the ideological challenges, value challenges, geopolitical challenges? How do we defend our ideals of liberty right now when Afghanistan has fallen into the hands of the Taliban? How can we make sure that security is respected when a large part of Africa is threatened by terrorists and Muslim fundamentalists? Europe needs to imagine a model that can allow us to fight against climate change and respect its fundamental values and guarantee security. What is the right model? Some say we have to have a European federation, which goes beyond the nation state, and I do not believe that. I think it is an error to think that in Europe we can go beyond the nation and create a federation that would be sort of marshmallow, without political backbone, without identity, without memory, without culture, therefore with no future. Instead, I think that we need to focus on our national choices, solidarity between nations, and have an even more solid cooperation, closer collaboration. So that is what the paradox of Europe. But as we go towards European integration, more solidarity, as we've shown throughout this economic crisis, we've been working together. We have put in place a joint debt, but we still have just as many nations, national identity. We respected our cultures, our language, and our memories, those that make the richness that is Europe. European integration should not, must not disrespect the nations that make up this continent that we are. And so I have a third conviction, and that is that if a conflict that comes out of this between China and the United States, with their rivalry taking this predominant place in the Europe, it could lead to direct or indirect confrontations. We saw under the Trump era that trade conflicts was the rule and peaceful solutions were the exception. The second type of conflict that's possible is between developed countries and developing countries. We saw that developed countries have been able to devote 1/4 of their wealth to protecting their economy and boosting the economy. We've done that in Europe to protect salaries, protect companies who invest and investing in infrastructures. So 1/4 of our national wealth at this time of COVID, isn't there a huge breach between developed and developing countries that can lead to political instability, persistent terrorist threat, and illegal migratory flows? Well, with some of these challenges, I know that France has a key role to play for the simple reason that France's strength is its culture. It's able to think the way its world vision and the way it approaches problems from in a universal way. And so we have to put our ability to reflect, to imagine, for consolidating geopolicy to the service of other European states. We need, as the president of France says, to have the ambition to have a powerful Europe, to have a veritable European empire that defends its ideals, its values, that fights against climate change and participates in building a fairer economic order and new capitalism. That is why France will rise to the challenge, and that's how we're going to do it with its citizens. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a great debate with Mr. Raffarin. So that was a pretty clear 8-minute message and a technical prowess. So we have 3 main ideas. Number 1 is to fight for our economic sovereignty. Here in Vienne, even in this area, is very important, is energy. Energy is key, and it's one of our strengths. So we have to master technology, and it has to be one of the pillars. So one of the founding ideas of the Futuroscope is on the front lines of this technological sovereignty. And the second point he raised was the paradox. I think it's important to think about that. How can we strengthen countries, nations, while cooperating? How can we make sure that nations are present and help others and are a force for good without taking away and thinking too much, looking too inwardly? So we have to invent a new European model, a powerful Europe that leads us to our third idea, and that is that there's a little bit of lack of transparency with the way, or the way we see certain parts of Europe. And the third main point he brought up, which is how we manage conflict. Some people believe in it, some are optimistic, some are not. I personally am quite worried with the situation in Taiwan, but there are other issues. And as Mr. Le Maire said, these are situations of either direct or indirect conflict. But things can change if we work on them. And so in these ways, France can really has a role to play.